This week, we're going to talk about basketball, from a bit of a different viewpoint. I pitched this topic being the off season now. We'll take a break from, evaluating or ranking all these superstars and the NBA, I guess, and sort of talk a little bit about our own basketball experiences. Obviously, myself and Nick, played basketball when we were growing up a lot, which is why we got a bigger love for the game. And I thought it might be interesting to sort of share in a pod with others that might have kids ultimately that are really into basketball, whether they're sort of 5, 10 years old, whatever that sort of age that they sort of might spot the game on TV and sort of, play with some friends at school and they go, hey, I want to get into this sport. And maybe, some people might find this sort of podcast helpful to sort of understand a little bit about the junior basketball playing experience in Melbourne, where we obviously were living, and more so, I guess, in Australia. And I guess, hopefully it gives a bit of insight there. So I guess firstly, to give a bit of background here, obviously, like I said, I've been playing basketball for over 25 years now. Started basically in primary school, and actually, I really wanted to play basketball in primary school, and my primary school was so small, I didn't even have a basketball team. I don't know if you know this story, Nick. So I actually had to play netball. I had to play netball for 2 years, and then my school closed down, and I went to another school, and they had a basketball team. It was like the best thing there, the new team. So I started playing basketball then. I think it was grade 4, and obviously, played for many years as a junior, all through junior domestic, into a couple seasons of rep when I was a little bit older, under 18s. And then obviously as an adult, took a bit of a time off. And then I was about 22, 23, I started to coach. So I coached for about 14 years, from under 8s to under 21s, boys and girls. I did about 4 years at some of the paid coaching at the grammar schools here in Melbourne. So that was a fun little experience there and get a bit of money too. Done obviously plenty of holiday camps, school clinics, and also done a bit of one-on-one stuff, a lot of bit of money on the side for me as a side gig for a little period of time, was sort of helping players, whether adults or kids, with their game and whatever they're trying to work with. So some players I spent a term with. I remember one player I spent about 6 months with, obviously building his game and getting him to sort of where he wanted to sort of improve. So that's a bit about my background. How about yours, Nick?
Yeah, obviously mine's quite different actually. I didn't pick up basketball probably until about the age of 13, so was roped in socially to start playing. And when I did first start playing, no prior experience and hadn't done much organized sport, so I wasn't very good. So I pursued a little bit of personal coaching, kind of similar to what you offered, which really helped me and developed my kind of game. And also paralleled it with doing some refereeing. So I picked it up at the age of 15 and did that for about 6 years. Great cash on hand job for people who want to put on little tournaments or whatever it is, and does help with perspective of the game and kind of understanding what you can and can't do. And there's probably minor tactical advantages, but it also it helps you appreciate what's going on the court and knowing certain things and kind of keeping your temperament. And then did some coaching via your club for a little bit. Did 4 seasons with some under 16s and made the championship pretty much every season, which was great. But and then also did a little bit of rep when I was 19, 20 sort of stuff. So got to drive around Melbourne and do the full experience of coaching and training and playing pretty much every night. And then unfortunately did ACLs. So I get to have the domestic version of the ACL life.
You can share your whole injury history with us later, yeah?
Yeah, I'm sure it'll come up about 7 times during this, especially on some of the topics. So,
that's cool. So I guess, look, I guess the first, topic here was really getting started, I guess, and I must say, like I said, I was really keen in basketball. I don't know if you remember the 90s, you're a bit younger than me, but the NBL was big in the 90s. Andrew Gaze, was dropping 40 points a game back then. And I think I was on free to air TV, Channel 10, I think. Steve Carfino, man, I don't even know that name, man. It was like, He was like, the big deal. And we would try and catch as much of these highlights, I guess, on basketball, off TV, on TV with these basketball games. And I guess that's sort of how I got into basketball. And I think everyone obviously gets into basketball differently, whether that's maybe a parent like me that's obviously really into it, or a friend brings a basketball to school and goes, hey, let's go play some basketball, or you obviously get some of that feel at school with PE, I guess, no doubt as well. Well, obviously just, sort of all the media nowadays and the hype with social media where you see everything anywhere when you're in primary school anyway. And I guess the key part here, I guess, back then was I didn't actually know where to start. Okay. And my mum obviously really didn't know much about basketball, so she wasn't really helpful. So even though I started playing grade 4, I didn't actually start playing competitive basketball on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, until I was about 12. Okay, so until about grade year 7. Okay, until about year 7. All right. So basically 3 years I played a bit of here and there at school. And that was really great fun. But obviously, nowadays there's obviously a huge pathway or easy pathway for obviously to begin playing probably from about 6 to 7 years old. Okay, in the under 8s, and I think that's a good starting point. I think it's a real area where, and we'll touch upon some of these things later in this pod as well. If the conditions are right and the environment is right, is obviously the starting ground to really develop your love for this sort of game. At the end of the day, I think though basketball is one where you really need a kid, your child to go, I want to play basketball. Because I don't think basketball is really one you throw your kid out there and go, hey, you go play basketball. And if they're not really that enthusiastic, then I don't think it often goes that well. And that's what I sort of observe. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think, the throwing them out there mentality, because basketball is a 5-on-5 sport, each person has a lot more responsibility for their team than the average sport does. And so, if there is a level of, if there's a skill discrepancy between your team and their team, or your individual status and your teammates' individual status, there's a bit of gatekeeping, or there's a bit of, log jamming that can occur, which we'll probably touch on a little bit more. In terms of, getting into it from different ages, unless you do have that direct path of, starting under 8s, for example, or even doing some of like the Oz kick variants of basketball stuff, it doesn't really occur probably until naturally during inter sport. And it definitely isn't on TV as much as things like AFL and even soccer. One thing that kind of was apparent around my age bracket was gaming, actually. So, the 2K releases, playing those and then learning about the league through that, or, wanting to do X, Y, or Z. You'd shoot hoops with your mates and then you'd go inside and play 2K. That's another little bit of link. And I don't know what it's like in present day because of obviously, social media and the reels that pop up, and which is great advertising and it's done by design. But in terms of gateway stuff, especially in Australia, NBL is retrending after a pretty big lull for almost like 15 years. They're starting to be a bit more popular. It's becoming a pathway for, your draft picks. We've had a couple now that are in the NBA and actually having an impact. So, it's on the upward trend. It's just kind of difficult to, I think it's difficult to compete. It's probably similar to America deals with NFL, because I think that's their priority. And, can you really usurp that, or is it just about trying to spread the wealth and exposure?
I think you touched upon a good point at the start there, though. Basketball is quite a unique sport where it is obviously a team sport, and you can't hide that kid that doesn't really want to be there. Okay, and all it does is, in all honesty, more often than not, that kid gets turned off basketball. He has he or she has a horrible basketball experience for that period of time he's made to go to basketball, and there's no real benefit from it, because I guess if you put your child into like an individual sport and they progress at whatever speed they progress at, there's no sort of pressure from others around them. How quickly you learn tennis or golf, that's totally up to you in a sense, as an individual. But I guess in basketball, because it's only 5 players on the court, unlike say footy, okay, when you got one kid in footy that's standing there and doesn't really touch the ball at all, doesn't want to get after the ball at all anyway, there's only one out of, nearly 20 players on the field. Okay, so it's not a huge impact. But when you got 5 kids out there, one kid just doesn't want to even run out and down the court, it's obviously really telling there. So I think it's really important to you set your expectations that your child sort of comes to you, okay, or at least shares your interest, that goes, yeah, I want to do this too. And I think that's really important. And I think some of the things like we want to talk about here is obviously things that like equipment and stuff that, you know, you might want to consider, you know, having available for your child. I remember when I played my first season, we went to Kmart and bought some shoes. So I was like ice skating, you know, up and down the court for my first season or so. You know, they were terrible, right? And I think shoes are definitely a critical point. I think nowadays the good news here that you can get really, you know, reasonable shoes from $100 to $150, I think, without breaking the bank. But again, sometimes you see kids sent out there with like school shoes or runners, okay, and old runners at that, okay, and it doesn't really do them any good there. You know, they again, you know, it's like sending a kid out there ice skating with, you know, normal shoes. Can't do it, you know. So I think shoes it's definitely a critical point of equipment. And the good news here is that there's not too much equipment you do need in basketball. You know, you get your shoes, you get your basketball, even a $10 ball will probably do your trick for you. And hey, you want to spend a bit more, get that basketball ring in the driveway, and I think you're set. I don't know. Is there anything else that you want to add there?
Well, there's obviously local parks as well. You know, they're a lot better at having a pop-up basketball ring, so you don't need necessarily to have one at your home. And you can also get the courts. You know, you can usually get the lining and practice things there. I mean, it's kind of funny. You're the one with more dependence than I am, but I put all the protective gear in because I was a big fan of that. Maybe for the accessory side, the practicality. So
Were you
knee
wearing that?
pads.
Were you wearing that when you were like in, you know, 12, 13?
No, no. I had nothing. I was, pale skin out on the court. I think, for me, especially juniors, and I've refed a lot of juniors, coached some juniors. Your kids will dive on the ground, and look, they're tough. They'll get over it, etc. But some knee pads actually go a long way. If you skid on the floor, you get a good burn. And some knee pads will buffer that, and give you the illusion of some compression. So that's not too bad. Mouth guard, you're talking to a gentleman who actually had front tooth knocked in just from an errant elbow. And they're always freak accidents when those occur. And you see a lot of players not wear mouth guards. Steph Curry might be popularizing that a bit, but maybe for the wrong reasons because he's chewing on it more than he's wearing it. But, dental work's quite expensive, and a mouth guard, you can get cheap ones for like $20 and do the gel. You can get customs for 150, 200. It's just, you can get hit in the mouth, right? Because people, you'll bring the ball up around, your shoulder, sometimes for drives. You'll be shooting and people will contest, they're freak accidents when they occur, but it is a cheap entry point. And then the last one I put down was goggles. You see a lot of kids, even some adults, they'll have glasses, prescriptive glasses, and they get knocked off. And if those get damaged, their lenses that are $200, their frames that need to be fixed. And they're also probably uncomfortable to play basketball in glasses. So I'm not sure how much goggles are, but I think if you're serious about it, if your kid's serious about it, that's fair to them because, they do need that vision on the court, but they also deserve some comfort and some security because it is definitely not ideal.
I used to play basketball with glasses. I used to wear glasses. I used to play basketball with glasses, and yeah, it was a huge pain. And I'm going to take you one step further here. Goggles are great if you're number one fan of Horace Grant, yeah, but get your kids onto contacts. Okay, obviously, my kids were obviously wearing contacts, probably from about 14. Okay, and I've seen kids obviously, start to learn how to be able to manage that in early years of high school. So if they can learn the technique and the safer, care of contacts and being able to take them in and out without too much issues, even if it's just dailies that they just wear on the weekend for their games. Okay, I think that's probably even a step better than goggles. In that sort of sense. In regards to eyewear. But you're absolutely right. It's funny because it is important to be able to see, right? I've had players before sort of go, oh yeah, look, I don't want to wear my glasses because they might fall off or get broken. And you go, okay, but what's the score? And they'll be like, I don't know, are we winning? I can't see the scoreboard at the other end of the court. So, I think that's definitely, having all your sort of, I guess what you're all your assets out there on the floor is definitely important for you to be able to succeed at basketball, I think so. But like I said at the start, it's the good news here is that there's not too much equipment, besides this sort of personal equipment in the sense you don't need a baseball bat or, a cricket bat or a bag and all the pads and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So I think that's a good starting point. The next part here is obviously a bit of expectations in sort of the first, 6 to 12 months of playing basketball. Expectations is a funny one here because I think this goes for any sport, right? If your kid takes up tennis, what's your expectations of his tennis in 12 months? Is he serving 100 kilometers an hour yet or what? And I think basketball is a funny one because I think the first one that jumps to mind as a coach for many years, and when I coach kids at under sort of 8s and under 10s and they first started playing basketball, is the expectation is that you score. Yeah, I don't know if you would agree with that. Is that you score? If you don't score, you're no good. Yeah, if you don't score, you're not doing the right thing. Okay, and I guess for my son Iverson, obviously, you coached him for a season or two. Okay, he actually didn't score for 2 seasons. Okay, that's a little fun fact there, Nick. You like your fun facts? Okay, he didn't actually score for his first 2 seasons, and as a parent, I'll be perfectly honest. I was sort of like, when's he gonna score? Yeah, as a basketball fan, it's like, is this, but you know what? He didn't shoot very much either. Maybe that was a bit of confidence and that sort of stuff. Some kids get there and they just throw the ball at the ring 10 times a game, even though they can't hit the ring, right? And they just do that. Okay, and obviously, he sort of had a game. He went out there and just, maybe took 1 or 2 shots a game at most, and then, didn't really want to try and shoot some more. Okay, and I think for me as a parent, I really focused on sort of talking to him after games about all the other good things that he did in the game. So clearly our conversations for the first two seasons were not like, oh, wow, you got that great bucket, or wow, you scored 10 points, because he didn't even score. Okay. So we still talked about a lot of the other things, obviously, that, happened in the game, other good things that he did, whether that was defensive, whether that was a rebound, dribbling, passing. And I think that's a real important expectation. I think that parents with our players that are children, it's really important to sort of focus on all these other things. Okay, it's not all about scoring. Okay, and I think that sort of positive, reinforcement, the positive feedback there about all these other areas of the game, especially when they're starting off. There's so many things you can pick on, you pick to sort of really talk about. Even the fact that they can dribble the ball up and down the floor as quick as they can. Okay, that's achievement in itself. Okay, because how many kids that can't even dribble the ball, right? That's the point. So I think when you set your expectations that there's little wins in every game, and it's not all about scoring, I think that's a real positive way to sort of sort of reflect and talk about a game once it's finished.
Yeah, look, the scoring one was the big one that I think would have come up inevitably. It was always the topic of conversation. So similar to me, 2 points in my first season of 24 games, and then maybe started to average 2 or 4. And this is the edge of 13, 14, where by this point there is that peer pressure to, hey, stop being so bad. But yeah, like you're talking about.
Who said that?
Just friendly people.
Yeah.
But you're totally right. Like defense is something that gets praised, but we kind of look, defense is not the interesting part of basketball. We all know that, but it's actually quite important. And some people make a living off that, and it also probably helps with as rep tryouts. Your level of energy and effort on defense can sometimes.
I'm going to interrupt you right now. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to actually say defense is a critical part of the game. I think if you think about any professional player, if you don't have an exceptional defensive ability, you won't succeed. Okay, I think that's the reality, and I think it's probably not even talked about enough in junior basketball. Okay, I don't think when I was like 12, 13, a coach never said to me, you got to focus on defense. If you want to be a professional basketball player, you got to spend much more effort and energy on defense. Okay, because that's so critical. Because again, going back to that scoring component, it's all about getting those buckets, right? And how many people can get buckets? Okay, how many great, good basketball players out there that are professional, have been professional, that can get buckets, but haven't had a career because they can't play defense.
Yeah, and I think even things such as just good team focus as well is another skill that maybe isn't focused on enough. Obviously, like, teams chop and change a lot. I played on so many different teams, both competitively and just casually, that it does become a very isolated sport of, hey, I've joined your team, this is what I bring to the table. And sometimes when you've got 5 people operating on the same pretense, it just doesn't work. And so sometimes finding your niche, sometimes understanding what is the role that I can fulfill today versus tomorrow. Because, even those kids that don't score very often, there's always that outlier game eventually where it's like, oh, today's their day. They've hit 5 layups. They've got 10 points. And, if you're on a good team, or if the team's kind of facilitating those opportunities, the success is better, and, the longevity is there. I guess the issue is that you watch the NBA, and it's more now than ever. It's always been transient. It really has always been transient. People think, oh, it's worse now than it always, ever was. But, your role players down, they were always flipping teams. It was your star players that stayed put. But now that the star players are moving regularly too, basketball is, hey, I'm an individual. This is what I bring to the team. But there's an underrated thing of the glue guys, the people who fit in anywhere. And, it's not talked about enough either as well. We highlight players like, Michael Jordan, who was exceptional. And then we talk about players like James Harden and Russell Westbrook, who are exceptional as well, but they get stuck in a box of, they don't work well as a team. And then, as a flip side, we have LeBron James, who works very well in a team, but then is heavily scrutinized. So it's trying to find the balance of, today, this is my role, maybe I am the scorer, maybe I'm not the scorer. But, how can you always be contributing towards some form of success, at least, quarter to quarter, half to half sort of thing?
Oh, absolutely. And look, scoring is a personal one. And I think the 2 points I think I really want to share here as an expectation in the first few seasons is, firstly, scoring personally and winning as a team. Okay. I think that's a huge emphasis as well on winning. Look, we all love to win, right? Sports is all about winning at the elite level, but that's the key words there, at an elite level. At the under 8s level, okay, winning is fun, okay, but I think, again, at the end of the day, the scoreboard is not the most important part of the conversation. I think as a coach, obviously, I get to spend 6 months, sometimes 12 months with a set of players and things like that. One of the nicest things of coaching is being able to see the progress. Okay, because and I've said this probably to you before, when you get to a point when they're ready to win, winning organically happens. Okay, that's the point. Okay, and everyone starts from a different spot. Some kids, get a basketball ball in their hand at 2 years old. Okay, and they're sort of real comfortable with basketballs and just ball sports and things like that. Other kids don't. Okay, and what we're looking for here as a coach, and ultimately what parents and players should be looking for, is like, where are they now when they started, and where do they get to over the course of a season? Okay, over the first 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, half a year. Okay, and when you look back at the progress that they've made, even if they haven't won a single game that season, okay, but you can see that growth and that progress, that those wins will come, okay, when they're ready. And I think, again, that's a big part, that parents shouldn't feel so disheartened if my kid goes out there, they don't score too much, they're not winning that many games. Doesn't mean they suck at basketball. It just means they're going to take a little bit more time.
Yeah, look, this would be my own profession coming into this a little bit as a teacher, but learning is not a linear path. I think a lot of people expect it to be that. It's supposed to be, today I'm this good, tomorrow I'll be this good, and then the next day I'll be that good. It comes in waves. Some days they look exceptional, other days it never clicks. It's one of the biggest things I often tell parents who are concerned about their child's progress is habits, right? Do they have good learning habits? Do they have good habits in general? Because progress can be fluked. We really overvalue results and progress sometimes, because, if I asked a random kid, hey, go shoot 10 free throws, and they hit 8 out of 10. And then after that one moment in time, I said, you're phenomenal. You're going to be one of the best players of all time. But that kid wants to be on their iPad 24/7 and actually didn't really want to do that, but only did it because I was buying the McDonald's or something random. You know what I mean? Like, that moment in time, just fixating on the results, I'm not understanding the full picture. I'm not understanding the desire to get better, their focus, their resilience, their mental fortitude. And you can luck into things. There are lucky shots, even in the professional level. Yes, they're professionals, they're athletes, they're elite, and they train a lot to reduce the margin of needing luck. But there is still luck involved in that. And I think for juniors, your child is developing skills, and sometimes it's like a light bulb, it just comes on, right? So one day, all of a sudden, they're just using that left hand. They practiced for 3 seasons trying to learn how to dribble with their left hand, but every game they go straight back to the right and they never go left. And then one day they're like, I'm going left. And it just clicks. And, as you said, the magic is you just watch that unfold over time. And we all want our next, I think, look, I'm not sure what it is. We all want to know or be or have the next prodigy in our lives. And statistically speaking, it's not going to happen. Sorry. But also, if it does happen, you won't even know what's actually happened until way later on, because your own little sphere, circle, whatever you want to call it, is not representative of everything. We know LeBron James is one of the best players of all time because he's been on the biggest stage at the highest level for a long period of time. But there was a period of time where he was just another kid playing basketball, and it doesn't become apparent until years later. And there's so many kids that are just kids playing basketball. The hype intensifies. Oh, they're going to be good. And it never actually pans out. The amount of steps that it takes to get to that prodigy level is ridiculous. And so to have that expectation from the very starting point is not healthy. It's not helpful, and it's not good for you or the child, because it's creating this weird pressure around
Absolutely.
what is supposed to be enjoyable, domestic sport that potentially just creates friendships for life, slash just creates healthy habits for exercise, and maybe can lead into employment or even just leisure opportunities for the remainder of their life. That really is the core business that you can guarantee if you don't come in with that prodigy expectation.
I think you touched upon a great point with what you're talking about right there. You talked about prodigy, and my kid's not going to be the next LeBron, and it obviously leads into the next sort of area we wanted to talk about. Actually, is I think the biggest thing you can do for your child in any sports, I would imagine, especially in basketball, is have them develop a love for the game. Okay, I think again, those highly successful athletes at the core, more often than not every single one, but more often than not, have this sort of real passion, obsession sometimes even, and love for the sport that they do. That's why they put in the hours and hours and hours and hours without being asked to do it, without anyone knowing they're doing it. Suddenly people think they're just, number one in the world because of what they do, because what they were just naturally God gifted talents. Okay. And I think we talk about all the time with basketball, like, my kids sometimes go, oh, wow, that guy who walked past us is 7 foot tall. He must be good at basketball. but we all know that, that's not the case. Okay. Just because he's tall, if he's never put in any work, okay, and he's never actually, put himself in a position where he loves the game of basketball, he probably can't even dribble a ball. He probably can't even shoot it. Doesn't care that if he's 7 foot tall. Okay. And I think that's the part where it's so important in this first few seasons. Okay. And when you're starting off, okay, that you create that right environment and atmosphere for your child to really just love what they're doing. Okay. So whether they love watching the clips online nowadays, whether they love playing 2K at home with their friends or, with whoever else is at home, whether they love to talk about basketball, and whether they want to love to just pick up that basketball and go shoot around in the driveway, or walk down to the park, or play, with friends at school. I think that's a real area where you really want to, ensure that you encourage, because basketball is one that, you can do it. You can do it in so many areas, even if it's, at night, you still involved in basketball by gaming 2K, as you obviously alluded to earlier. And it's something that really, I think is important, because again, so many kids I've seen, once they get through, and they're quite talented kids, obviously, and they're probably about, maybe in 15, sort of at that sort of age, in the mid-teenage years, if they don't have that love for the game, as talented as they are, they're the ones that often go, nah, I'd rather just work, get a job. I'd rather just work and get a job. Nah, I'd rather just go to that party. Nah, I'd just rather play footy. Okay. So if you haven't developed that love for the game by that point, then, doesn't matter how great you are, doesn't matter how athletic you are, how many points you score. Okay. Often by that age, you can sort of see that, nah, they're not really, they don't have that ingrained in them.
Yeah, look, and you can't force it either. We can talk about trying to identify, create healthy habits, but if basketball is not their thing, it's not their thing. And so, you have to look at it as, I guess I'll bring it back, those social connections as well. There's a chance that they get paired up or they play basketball with someone who also plays footy, and that's their gateway to footy that they didn't have otherwise. Or that person is, someone who grows up to, do the same uni course as them or move to the same town. There's a lot of things, and there's a lot of research that goes into just playing team sports in general, just having the discipline to have a regular commitment and show up to it. And even if you're not feeling up to it, you still give it a go, and all of those benefits. And so, when you invest your child into sport, you are doing it for those reasons, and anything extra is the bonus, right? So the one parent that's lucky that does get the next prodigy who brings home $20 million is, that's the bonus, right? But you can't go in with that expectation. And even, you notice it all the time in the NBA, parents of great players don't typically have children who end up being on par with what their level of success was. Bronny James Jr., who's coming through now and he keeps getting touted as things, he potentially only gets drafted due to the status of the name / the weird kind of association that LeBron will join that team. He's actually, he's good, he plays basketball, he loves it, but it just doesn't always translate. And so, as the average Joe, I played a little bit of basketball when I was younger. It's past me now. If I have kids and put them into it, doesn't mean that they're even going to be as good as me, and I wasn't good enough to go to certain levels anyway. So it's just it's reality check stuff. I don't know how to say it nicely.
Look, I think the point it feels like worth alluding to here as well is that it's sort of the flip side of that coin, though. We talk about these kids that are passionate about basketball that do obviously join a club and play. Okay, and I think that is important. Okay, like I said, I played for a few years at school initially. Once I got into a, there was a team at school, but there's nothing more beneficial than the club structured competitive sport. Okay, again, because I've coached so many years, I've seen so many different sort of families, I guess, and parents and players. Ultimately, there's that group of players that sometimes makes me a little bit disappointed, perhaps, that they love basketball. Okay, they love basketball, and they're often given the sort of feedback that, oh, well, you already play at school. Why do you need to play competitively? Okay, well, that's like you love drawing, but just here, just have a pencil and never get any colors. Yeah, you know what I mean? That's a huge disappointment. You would as a parent myself, I would sort of feel that when your child exhibits an interest in something where suitable and appropriate, obviously, and don't get me wrong, cost is obviously a component too, is that you can try and encourage it. And I think the next step, obviously, with encouraging a kid that is interested in basketball is to join a club. Okay, because the competitiveness of being able to just get up on the floor and try to, ultimately try to beat another team on a weekend is a critical component of you developing your game as a basketball player. There's only so much that you can love and do and play at school, okay? But unfortunately, you're probably not tapping into a passion that's there, but not developing it into a skill or talent, ultimately.
Yeah, look, I think, we've probably reiterated the whole point of, parents just calm down a little bit, give them the opportunities to succeed, but, do it within reason. So I guess the extreme side of that is if you enroll your child into competitive basketball, don't enroll them in 2 other clubs so that they play on different days or different nights and overdo it. But also don't keep jumping clubs because you want that instant gratification of, oh, well, my child who clearly can't dribble with their left hand or even dribble confidently around defense, well, the coach always subs them off when the game gets close, or the coach doesn't keep them on for long periods of time. I'm not getting the development that I deserve. I should go elsewhere. Development doesn't occur naturally during games. Games are typically where you see payoff for all of the training habits. So if your child's doing the training habits, getting exposed to that, in those sessions, they are getting quality coaching or they're getting the quality experience. It's just currently not translating to the page. So to go on with your drawers analogy, they're great at sketching in their sketchbook, but when it comes time to do an exam, where they got 30 minutes to draw something, we're not getting the finished product that we know that they're capable of, or that they're starting to demonstrate there, because it hasn't condensed itself to that kind of crunch time performance mode just yet. And that happens in so many different things. And again, to bring it back to learning, when you get a kid to do a test, or we get kids to do NAPLAN, for example, that's a day with those questions, and it's not always everyone's cup of tea, and it's not always indicative of true performance. It's just simply what they were able to do today. And so, again, bring it back, that kid that hit 8 out of 10 free throws on that hypothetical, if you're a really good player who practices every day and you hit 2 out of 10, that one performance doesn't mean that, well, okay, well, it's not working, maybe find something else. It's just that one performance, and you can take it or leave it.
Not at 8 years old. That's the point. Not at 8 years old, right? But look, I guess the next area we want to talk about is obviously supporting your child. We put your before, during, and after games, and sort of everything we've been talking about sort of leads into this really, and it's sort of more than, like any sport. Again, it's more than just turning up. Okay, and the good news here again is that I know sometimes, you have a busy schedule, especially you've got a few kids, you got to run around, you don't really have that much time in between. But a lot of this support and preparation can occur on the way to the game. Okay, can occur half an hour or 60 minutes while you're still at home before the game. I think some of the things, and I'll let you sort of talk more about the things that we had jotted down, but like your warm-ups and stuff like that, you can start that at home. Okay, you can start that at home. Okay, and again, it's developing the fundamentals. Okay, the fundamentals are obviously not only fundamentals of the sport, but the fundamentals of leading into sport. Okay, these are all critical components of giving your child the most out of that sporting experience, and that basketball experience in this instance, I guess. I don't know, maybe you should talk a bit more about the warm-up, because this is really important for you. I think you take this area very seriously now, right?
Yeah, so obviously, I guess I'll start with the first one that I wrote down. It was ritual. So a ritual can mean anything to anyone. So some people think that it means, putting your left shoe on before your right shoe, and that may be what works for your child. Ultimately, it comes down to just mentally preparing yourself. So I'd highly recommend not being glued to a screen right before a game. I just don't think that it's the greatest mental preparation. It's, it's stretching. It's not even just the physical warm-up, it's the mental warm-up of understanding I am getting my body ready to do something. Because irrelevant of the competitive side of things, there's also a self-preservation side of things. And getting yourself in a good headspace before you play, getting your body in a good spot before you play is really important. So stretching is 20 to 30 seconds held, which a lot of people don't. They just do and then they feel like they're done. You need to hold that stretch. You need to stretch the areas that you think. People use rollers, to kind of figure out sore spots of the body, or like what isn't activated. Making sure your shoes are laced properly, giving it a couple of like Tesco's, doing a couple of laps, doing, some dribbling with the ball just to get warmed up. All of that is valid. Like NBA teams, you don't see it. It's unfortunate. But the shoot around that goes into their preparation is
preparation
massive.
Before a game is literally an hour preparation, if not longer, for some players. Absolutely.
And you can trace it back all the way to, what did you have for breakfast? What did you have for lunch? Did you sleep well? Have you been active? How are you feeling? What did you have for dinner the night before? There's a lot of things that go into that, and level of education really dictates the understanding behind that. But giving your child a sense of control over something before a game, which is legitimately designed to have 10 people try to control one thing, is also kind of beneficial, because there can be some anxiety, for performance, right? Like, okay, I'm worried, like today's the final, or today's a big game, or, today I want to do this, or we know that we don't have this player because they're away today. So, there's controlling that. If you come into a game knowing, I've laced my shoes the way I want to, I did my warm up, I had my banana before the game, whatever it may be, you are already feeling more confident stepping onto the court than you would if you just I was playing Subway Surfer 2 minutes before the game and I haven't got my shoe tied up properly. Let me just quickly do it now.
Yeah, look, I think you're absolutely right. And again, as that 8-year-old, you probably not you don't have a ritual in place yet. But by the time you play 15, by the time you're 18, or obviously, once you've played for many years, you will start to obviously develop your own ritual and ways you just prepare for to sort of be comfortable to go out there to play the best that you can. And I think it's important for parents, especially when they're starting off, okay, that you start to just touch upon these sort of topics. I know before games, I'd often say to the kids things like, why don't you go shoot around a bit and get warmed up, and just, it's not necessarily even stretching. It's just going out there, like you alluded to, instead of playing games or the computer or PlayStation 30 minutes for the game, they'll be much better off probably out the front shooting free throws. Okay, or obviously, in the driveway shooting free throws or layups or something like that. It's also there's a mindset that I think you touched upon as well, that again, as a parent, you can really start to start to begin that conversation. And again, it doesn't happen at that age. That's the point. It's something that you start that conversation at 8, and if it pays off, 5 years later when they're 13, or 10 years later when they're 18, then it's a huge payoff where they're starting to think about what they want to do in a game. Like so many kids turn up to a game and they're talking about, Fortnite that they were playing 10 minutes ago. And I have to tell them to sometimes just shut up and let's talk about basketball, because we're at a basketball game right now, right? We're trying to play basketball for the next 40 minutes and hopefully get a win, and you're happy, and, your parents are a bit happy, and, everyone's just achieved our goal here, because that's generally what it is. But they've come here thinking more about Fortnite, okay, and obviously what else that they're doing in their lives that has nothing to do with basketball. Okay, and I think that's an important part where, again, if you sort of guide your kids in that sort of direction, those 30-60 minutes before the game, on the drive to the game and things like that, I think that can really help them, sort of get ready for, to perform their best ultimately, whatever that might be for them.
I guess we transition on to supporting the coach and even the players a little bit during the game, because it's not as simple as just saying good job and then yelling at the referee when you don't agree with something. There is some other things. So one of the ones that I noted down was seeking and applying feedback. So you would hope that your coach is an expert, or at least has something to offer you that assist your child, and whatever that may be, you can ask that in a respectful way. You can be, what is the next step? I had a conversation with a parent once, because basically their child was a pretty consistent shooter if they were able to catch the ball at the same spot pretty much in their pocket, because then they didn't have to raise up and shoot. And the second that you threw a pass that was a little bit outside that pocket, up, down, left, right, didn't matter, it instantly turned them from a 60% practice shooter to a 30% practice shooter. So the feedback there was like, all right, he clearly can shoot and he's got this down pat. We need to now practice catching it off balance, a little bit uncomfortable, and then recorrecting yourself before putting the shot up, or, putting the shot up in rhythm, but out of balance a little bit. And, whether or not that feedback gets applied, I'll never know. My job is just to simply, give it to you, and then you need to apply it. And that's kind of the cheering that you can put on. So, if you notice that your child's struggling to shoot today, then, you encourage them on the other end with the controllable stuff. Hey, good defensive stance, keep that going, keep the energy, keep the hustle, those kind of things. That's the sort of encouragement that you should be offering the child. Because so easy can we fall into the trap of, oh, that's not a foul, etc. And, I'll get into it on the reffing round. It'll probably go for a while, but, control the controllable. I think that's a big thing for any sport. Put yourself in a position, do the right things, go into it with the understanding that I know how to shuffle my feet. If I made a mistake, I can correct it, come back and do it again. And then the other thing I wrote down was kind of understanding what the coach is doing. You can't go up to them in real time and ask, but what is your level of understanding of the game? Because that's already a swaying pendulum of, difference. But why is the coach trying this tactic? Why is the coach not allowing my child to play right now? And the reason why all of that's so important is because backseat coaching, just like anything that feels backseat, never really works the way you want it to. If you've ever been a backseat driver, it doesn't typically make the driver very happy. If you ever over ask questions to someone who's doing something, who's an expert, it typically starts to wear that person down. And there's a level of trust that goes into it. You hope that basketball coaches aren't just parents tap on the shoulder to do it because there's no one else to do it. They actually want to be there, and they're trying to develop something and, you know, do it for the love of it.
Look, you touched upon some really good points there. You know, firstly, I guess one of the phrases that I like to use as a coach when things aren't going to plan in a game, okay, is let's focus on what we do and not so much on the other team. And that really ties into that control what you can control component. You know, at the end of the day, in sports, sometimes you just get beaten by a better team or a better player, better opposition, okay? And you just have to accept that and respect that, okay? But what you want to do, especially in basketball, is be able to just go out there and play as best as you can within your ability, okay? And it's all comes back to those fundamentals, starting from, you know, first day and the first season and the first year, that, you know, if you put out your best effort, okay, then at the end of the day, like we said earlier, the result's not so important, okay? You know, if you put out your best effort and you fell short, you can still hold your head up high, and you should still get a pat on the back, and your coach will probably see that. If he's a good coach, he'll go, hey, we went out there and threw everything at him, but we still lost today, and that's okay, you know, because that's what happens in sports sometimes, you know what I mean? And I think that's a really important part, you know, where, again, that parent reinforcement of that message for your coach is critical, like you alluded to. You know, just because, you know, you lost a game, okay, or you might lose a handful of games in a season, okay, that it's a process. It's a process there, okay? And I know one of the things that I've tried to do more so than ever now in the last, you know, 5 years or so of coaching, maybe a bit longer even, is the emphasis on the 3-point shot, okay? And I'm talking about at the under 10s level, under 12s level, okay? That often it's a bit of a challenge for them, for some players at that range. But the key here is, to me as a coach, is the encouragement to add that shot to your game. Okay, like you said, that kid that can hit 60% from that spot, hey, we can all generally, okay, make those layups, right? Or there's, you know, 5 or 10 footers, okay? But if we fall in love with that, okay, and back in the day it was a different game, okay, the game has evolved a lot too. That's another podcast potentially, okay, that if we fall in love with that 10-foot shot, you're never going to succeed in the game today. Okay, that's the reality. Okay, you're gonna, unless you become 7 foot tall, okay, that 10-foot shot is not really your bread and butter. So encouraging kids, for me as a coach, you know, whether they're 10 years old or 15 years old or whatever age they are, but it starts at that sort of, you know, under 10s, under 12 sort of bracket, to shoot that 3. Okay, and because they were open, because they were the right option to shoot that 3, and you sort of live with the result. You go, hey, well, you missed, but that's okay. Shoot it again next time. Okay, and that's the part where parents often will then murky the message that you try to deliver as a coach and encourage as a coach, because they'll say something like, oh, look, you can't shoot a 3. Why don't you go shoot that 10-foot shot again that you make all the time? Okay, because that 10-foot, you know, that 10-foot shot is not going to be the one that's going to help you become a better player. Okay, you know, you've obviously shoot that fairly well already. That's great. Use it when you're there. But when you're open at the 3-point line and your coach gives you a green light to shoot it, okay, I definitely am encouraging you to shoot that. And you would like, in those instances, I guess, where the parent also reinforces that message that, you know what, that's okay. You missed that one and you missed the last 10. But the point here is that, you know, if you're going to succeed in the professional game of basketball now, you're probably going to need to be able to shoot that long range shot as best as possible.
Well, also, I think you were starting to touch on it, you know, that parent pressure of, you haven't scored yet, you're taking shots you don't need to take. You know that you can hit this shot, just go take it. And it's, you know, it's one of those, it's hilarious to hear, because I've heard this as well. Like, oh, just do this, it'll just start working. Yeah, because, you know, the other team will just suddenly adjust to allow you to do the thing that they're legitimately trying to stop you from doing, you know, by allowing easy layups. Yeah, they're just going to start giving those up. It's, you know, there's ebbs and flows to it, you know, like in theory, every coach would want their team to generate steals and get easy, fast break layups.
Just get the ball.
Just get the ball and put it in the hoop. And that's easy, right? But, you know, it is, you know, in a sense, basketball's got a chess match. There's things going on. And, you know, the one team doesn't want the other team to score. And you might have had success last week doing something, and it doesn't mean that. And you see it, you know, if we have to bring it back to the NBA, Steph Curry in the NBA finals, was phenomenal for 5 out of 6 of the games. And the one game that he wasn't, he missed all 9 of his threes and broke a 132 game streak of hitting threes in playoff games. And, you know, during that game, no one should have told him, Steph, buddy, just stop shooting, just go do some layups. It's, especially as coaching, we design it. We want to get good shots for players, right? And there's good shots that are designed to win the game, and then there are good shots for development. And it's odd to hear, but even in domestic leagues, there are different, like franchises in the NBA, there are different goals for the season. If you've been gifted a group of players that have never played before, that is a development season, and you hope that maybe in a season or two it comes together and they're competitive. But that is getting those players integrated into basketball. And then sometimes you get gifted 3 or 4 players that are really competent, and you juggle, where you go, well, we can win, but we also want to make sure we develop. And then you get a team that's just like, if we don't win the championship, these parents are leaving the club. So, there's different tiers to it. And I guess also understanding, again, it comes back to being realistic. Is your child a prodigy, or is your child developing, or is your child sort of in the middle? And are you in an alignment with that?
I think look, you're absolutely right. And I think in my opinion, that one of the fundamentals of being supportive for your child and your player and for your coach and your team ultimately is being realistic in what you're looking for. Okay, so one of the classic ones is like rebounding. Okay, it's not very glamorous. There's no stats kept for it at a junior level, but it's a critical part of the game. We know as coaches and any basketball player knows that the more rebounds you can grab, the more chances you're going to give yourself to be able to win a game. Okay, it's simply the more the ball you have, the better it is for your team. But the reality is that you're not going to grab every single rebound. Okay, so as a coach, over the years, obviously, of coaching, I started to sort of really define and refine my sort of messages to my players, and one of them in the rebounding component was, I'm not looking for a player to grab every rebound, as much as who wouldn't love that, okay? I'm looking for a player to contest and compete at every rebound. Okay, that's the key, okay? I couldn't care less whether you grabbed 1 rebound, but you contested for all 20 shots. Okay, you went and jumped against that player and you had your eyes on the ball and you went to attempt to box out, obviously, at a higher level. You obviously put yourself in the front position and so on and so forth once you had those fundamentals in place and you competed. Okay, and it's the same thing like Steph Curry shooting nine shots. He kept shooting. Okay, it's the same message, whether it's defensively that player beats you every time, but you step up and you compete. That player out rebounds you every time because he's simply maybe a better, taller player, has got jumps higher and stronger than you, but you compete, okay? Or whether you're just having a bad shooting day where you shoot 0 from 10, okay, but you keep shooting because if you stop shooting, as we all know, you're not going to score. Okay, that's the whole reality. And I think that's a message where parents can really play a big part in that. You're looking for that competitiveness, that energy, that effort. And the result, again, is a byproduct. Okay, the result is a byproduct of that. And if you have that fundamental in place, especially from an early age, then you'll get that player, as the scouts will talk about, with that high motor. Yeah, because that high motor is the one that everyone looks for. Okay, because when you've got that high motor, then you can refine it to a point where, once again, that they're ready, that it turns into production that you're looking for. All right, but without that motor, it's there's not much to work with, I think, there. And I think it all starts from those early days. I think the messages that you sort of try and give your child and the players out there.
Yeah, well, like effort translates. Ed, like if you're putting effort in on the court, there's a high probability you put effort in training and you have good habits. And again, it's one of those things that, all right, if a scout comes and watch a game, which I think we'll get onto scouting a little bit later, but if a scout comes and watches your game and it's the one game that you really aren't playing well, the scout is talented enough to understand what's the level of effort, what's the IQ, like there is a difference between scouting with like results orientation and scouting with actual scouting. And so an actual scout will notice these are good tendencies. These are clearly shots that they can create for themselves that they're not hitting today, or that they're open, but they're not hitting. And also like they understand logic, they understand logic. They do look at other stats. They do look at other things. They do look at a body of work. It's not, not every single game has to be the be all and end all. And then I guess that comes down, it's not just about your child. When you obviously participate in a basketball club, you're supporting a team, you're not just supporting your child. And that sometimes is really difficult for parents because they might philosophically disagree with another child on the team because that child is better than their child and they know it, but they can't admit it. So they get jealous or annoyed because that child gets more attention, or they never pass. You know, I hear that one often, like, oh, they just never pass, or, you know, oh, they're just always shooting. You know, the coach is probably aware if that really is an issue, but it's not typically. But it's not just in the encouragement, right? So especially, you know, at a local basketball level, you know, parent volunteers and doing their part, that actually makes the sport run. And yes, all right, I've talked to a lot of parents about this. Weekend sport, it's the bane of their existence. They hate it. But you know, as one of the things that I counter with that is that it's precious time, because it's, statistically speaking, the best window your child ever has to play sport uninterrupted, because their injury risk is low, because typically, unless they're breaking bones, they're pretty jelly. You know, they'll bounce right off, they'll be fine. Money, you know, because they're not self-funding it, because they're not trying to juggle a job with it, they literally just, you know, have infinite energy going to school and then going to sport. This may be the only chance that they get to ever do undisrupted sport. And so you making sure that you do your part on the scoring, you know, making sure that if you are involved with the team manager, that you're assisting that process, putting your hand up to do things. You know, I'm gonna say some hot stuff here, but we don't probably have enough viewers for this to be an issue. But like, these are some of the things you sign up for if you choose to have a child. I know not everyone chooses to have a child, and that there's circumstances for that, but like, this is one of the many things that you kind of signed up for, and it's all well and good for someone to be saying it, but ultimately, if you would like the child that you brought into this earth to have a certain quality of life in this specific interest, you may have to volunteer to press some buttons on a computer screen that has really developed over the years. This is another tangent. I was old enough for the score sheet, and I saw it transition to the computers. The computers were designed to assist people. It's easier now than it ever was. The score sheet had specific markings. You had to write a specific way. It's much easier now. And then the scoreboard, everyone's like, I don't know how to do the scoreboard. You hit a button like that, right? And if you screw it up, there is an undo button.
Undo. That's right.
Yeah, but if you don't know how to do the undo button, guess what? Statistically speaking, more points will be scored in the game. Just wait. Okay, just wait. It will happen. All right.
It feels like you're letting out some pent-up trauma here, Nick. You know, it's okay. It's okay. It's been a few years.
I feel like, you know how there's certain things, right, that people just do socially, and we just accept it as like, oh, you know, it's just a colloquial line, right? So asking about the weather when you don't know what to talk about, right? That's a big one. Another really popular one at a basketball stadium, when you ask someone to score, is, oh, I don't know how to. Oh, no, I'll mess it up. I don't want to make any mistakes.
Yep.
It's not a big deal. It's really not a big deal.
I think, look, you're absolutely right. Okay. And it's all part of the whole package. And it's all part of the whole positive experience. Okay. I'm going to give I'll give you a hot take here. All right. Here's a statement for our 10 followers at the moment. Yeah. Maybe we'll jump to 11 after this podcast. If you're not going to be a good team manager, don't be a team manager. Okay. A team manager is so important to how successful and enjoyable that season will be. Okay, so whether that's 6 months or 12 months, usually, okay, a good team manager, along with a coach that wants to have a successful and enjoyable season, okay, is critical. Okay, because it looks like this, and we know all team sports, those team sports and basketball especially, because there's only 5 players on the floor. Okay, is that you need to get along with everyone. You need to know each other. You don't have to be best friends. No one's saying that. Okay, it's not that you have to hang out with each other every day, but you need to, you know, have some level of camaraderie and enjoyment to play with each other. Okay, in that sort of sense. Okay, and that is created outside the game. Okay, if you've got team managers and teams that don't want to go and do something at the end of the season. You've got teams that don't want to, stick around for 10 minutes and shoot around with each other. Okay, you've got team players that, get to training and leave as soon as the training leaves and stuff like that, and they don't get to know each other. It often doesn't eventuate into a highly successful team. Okay, and if you think about the teams that you often have coached, the ones that have at least a core number of players that got along, okay, and sometimes there's those couple players that just for whatever reason don't necessarily fit in with that core group. Okay, maybe they just came from a different school or a different area and things like that, and they're slowly but surely, they get that opportunity and time to sort of, get to know each other. Okay, I think that it's a really, those are the teams that are highly successful. Okay, but the opposite here is that when you get a team manager that obviously doesn't really have an interest to do so, I'm just doing it because someone has to, so I'll just do it. Okay, just give me your money and I'll just collect it and pay the team sheet. Okay, it serves no purpose. It serves no purpose for the club and for the team and for your players. Okay, in that sense, and often that then filters down through, and no one has any enthusiasm about that sort of team. Okay, and it really just doesn't build that rapport. And unfortunately, I'll say that my observation here is that 10 years ago, basketball was so much more close knit. And I'm not saying every team's like this, okay, but 10 years ago, basketball was much more close-knit. 20 years ago, it was even closer than that, okay? And now we're sort of in I don't know, this whole nother podcast, right? A society or whatever that, we all do whatever we do, right? So even that point that at the end of the season, once a season, hey, let's all get together and go to Macca's to have a breakup. Oh, no, I'm busy, okay? What's the point? Okay, maybe we didn't win enough games, okay? Many players and not players so much, many parents, okay, don't see that benefit, okay, but it's there. I think that's the point. It's there, okay, and it's disappointing because you do need everyone to buy in. It doesn't matter if I'm a team manager or a parent that goes, hey, I'll come, but no one else is coming. Like, what's the point? So but someone has to set that up, and a team manager is really critical to that. Okay, and I think that, and along with the coach, and the coach here it's a mixed bag. We just talked about the coaching component there. We also have to accept that coaches, just like coaches, just like players, okay, all start off somewhere. Okay, and that's the thing. And in junior basketball, you will encounter those coaches that are starting off. Okay, and again, and we'll talk about these pathways in a little bit. If you're looking for a more consistent or higher expectation from your coach, that's where you look at your pathways from junior basketball. Okay, but again, we have to give coaches an opportunity to begin somewhere. The coaches have to have that first season where they coach and they play not really sure what they're doing, and they want to do really well, but they suck at everything they're doing. They're making the wrong calls and stuff like that. We got to give them that opportunity, because only when you give them that opportunity over, again, a period of time, and hopefully their passion ignites as a coach to become better as a coach, to make their players and their team better and develop basketball players, positive basketball players. Okay, then you'll create that. But again, if you think about this, how many coaches probably coach, especially young coaches, coach a season or two and get turned off because, well, my team didn't win enough. My parents all harped on about all this stuff that that was not really in my control. My players didn't dunk at 8, so I must have been a bad coach. You know what I mean? It's that's the thing. So again, we haven't probably used this word, patience. Okay, patience here. Okay, along with obviously, this building environment is so important to support the whole community in the basketball team.
I think it's we've touched on this probably privately, but it's instant gratification. I think that's a word that is also probably important to introduce, is that not going to those team functions, not being active in the things. Those are things that you can do to invest, and you do not get instant gratification for doing that. It legitimately will feel like a waste of time, right? And if you had to hear my nihilistic wisdom, on this fine Thursday evening, my nihilistic wisdom would be everything can be considered a waste of time, right? So perspective is really important. If you if you are committed to trying to do something, if you give it your all, then you can walk away from it knowing that you did your controllable thing. You may very well enroll your child into a club that is not suited for you, and you can do everything right and it doesn't work out properly. And we all know that time is precious, especially when we're talking about children, because those years fly by very quickly. And if you're trying to pursue something basketball related, you can't waste time at a bad club for 4, 5, 6 seasons. But if you never give it a proper go, expecting it to just fall onto your lap, then there is going to be a lot of shrugging shoulders, etc. Of, well, what did you expect? Hey, you never got your kid to training half the time. Hey, you didn't pay your team fees, and you were constantly having fights with the coach, and the coach was forced into some weird disciplinary issues for some reason because even though it's junior sport, you for some reason had to make an example out of the 16-year-old coaching your team in front of everyone, and so he was advised to not let your child start the next game. There's all these different things that can occur. So it's perspective. If you want a good experience, then you have some steps along the way. I think the customer mindset has just oozed into everything, right? Everything is, well, I'm paying you money, so you should do this for me. This is how it should be. I should just get this instantly. I shouldn't have to do this. I'm paying you money. And, I'm sure clubs could arrange for it. Clubs could arrange for scorers. Clubs could arrange for a team manager. It's just going to cost you to pay those people to do it because, that's the reality of what you want.
I love one of the ones that I've observed, not so much my teams, I would never really agree to this, but was the perfect division of minutes. It was like, yeah, we've got a stopwatch and we're going to perfectly divide the 40 minutes or so, or 36 minutes sometimes nowadays, or 34 minutes sometimes nowadays in the game between the number of players, and everyone gets the perfect amount of minutes. Because like we all get the same pay packet, right? And we all drive the same car, and we all get the same opportunities and fairness in life that we all deserve. Is that correct?
It's
What?
the communist coaching.
It's like, how does that even work? And like I said, I've never subscribed to that as a coach, because sports is not like that. Okay, sports, and that's why we love sports, because of the unpredictability of a game and the outcome and who could win or what might happen in the last few minutes and so on and so forth. And I think that's an area where the sometimes that support has now gone to a point where it's a whole nother area that's not really positive for sports in general and for basketball in general. But at the end of the day, if you can accept that sometimes your kid might play more, sometimes your kid might play less. Hell, he might play less because he's in foul trouble. You know what I mean? Okay, maybe today he's just not looking, he's looking tired, he's not running as hard as he could. Okay, and sometimes he's having a really good game. Then yeah, the coach probably should see that and probably will go, hey, you're going to get it 5 more minutes today. Okay, and that's just how it should be. And that's where that support, again, we're really looking for. I think as a coach, and obviously goes a long way, because then your kids understand that, what, I'm not going to play the same minutes every week. I'm going to earn my minutes. I'm going to earn my minutes because I'm playing well. I'm going to earn my minutes because I'm running hard on every possession and contesting every rebound, not because I'm simply allocated 19 minutes a game. I'll just take it. What I do with it doesn't matter. Okay, because in sports it does. Okay, and that's the point here, which sort of leads to the last support component that we want to talk about, which is sort of the support of the game. Obviously, you were a referee for, how long were you a referee for? Like a couple of
6
years?
years.
6 years, yeah. So, and I look, I'll share my opinion real quickly here. I'm not a big referee fan. We can make a whole nother podcast on that, let's be clear. But I think something that I've really accepted as a coach, as a parent, as a basketball player, more often than not, okay, is that the referees are critical to the game, no doubt. Okay, and we all talk about that they're human. You guys obviously will make your calls and based upon your judgments and things like that. And it's a level of respect, okay, that I think that as a player and a coach and a parent has to be evident that when a call's been made, you accept it, because there's only, I don't think, actually, you know what, I'm not even going to say I don't think, I have never seen a call overturned in a game, okay, which is something we were talking about in a professional game, because now you got replays and replay center and digital footage and so on and so forth, okay. But from a junior perspective, I've never seen a ref go, oh, well, you're disputing this foul call, so I've changed my mind now. I'm going to reverse it for you. It never happens. So I think, again, there's a healthy level of obviously voicing your opinion, especially in the heat of a moment. But at the end of the day, I think that's something that needs to be quickly moved on, and you focus on the next play. Okay, and I think that's obviously a key component of successful basketball, because you might miss the ball, but you don't have to hold on to that for 40 minutes. You let it go and you focus on making your next shot. And it's exactly the same thing. You'll get some bad calls. That happens. Okay, and you could obviously voice it. You can talk about it. The call's not going to change, but you've got to move on. And I think, again, I'm sure we've both seen, and you've seen as a referee, where players and parents do not move on. And obviously that's where it's crossing a line, I think.
So my insider goss on this one will be, a good referee would be aiming to be correct about 60 to 70%, because there's
Not 100,
no way that
not
it's gonna be
100. How about
No,
99?
no. I mean, look, aspirationally, yeah, but realistically, no. There are so many things that can happen, right? Especially, like, here's a couple of extra things I'll talk about, especially as someone who did a lot of domestic. You're not even worried 100% of the time about what's happening on court. Like when you see people walking baseline, going to their game or finishing their game or walking along baseline, they're actually standing in the position that we're supposed to get to, right? And we have to then periphery / sometimes head check. Like, I don't want to crash into a child while I'm trying to referee a game. I don't want to crash into someone. I don't want to hurt myself. Don't want to hurt them. So we don't have uninterrupted space, right? That's the first and foremost. Two, you'd actually be surprised how many times parents, scorers, coaches just make little niggling comments that are naturally going to trigger a human reaction of, well, I want to respond to that. I want to answer that. And if you, like, there's irony in this, because, hey, you disagreed with my last call and you want to start an argument with me and you actually get my attention. Well, I'm about to miss another 2 or 3 calls because you've got my attention in this. You said it. We don't change calls. We're actually told not to. We're taught not to. It is not to be stubborn. It is not to be like, gung-ho. It's actually because if we started changing calls, it just, all chaos, right? Because then it comes into, well, now we're just encouraging people to come make their case. Who's more convincing? Imagine all the games. Imagine how much game time would be lost if we did hear you. Like we said, all right, you come over here, you come over here. Let's have a chat.
Let's have a chat. Let's have a chat about this foul.
Yeah. And do the review process on every single thing. The one thing that can occur, right, but it's never done for a good reason. If I have 5 or 6 people yelling at me, which has happened in the past, all of a sudden it puts the pressure on me of, I want to get control of this game, right? I'm not enjoying this for myself. I don't like where this is heading. Everyone's getting really chippy. That's when you get tech fouls. That's when you get extra calls made because you're trying to gain control of the game. We're taught to do that as well, right? Because ultimately referees are trying to control the game. The irony is, a good game, the ref shouldn't blow the whistle at all, right? If you're playing good, honorable defense and there's no accidental contact and there's nothing else, it should just be out of bounds. It should be timeouts. It should be substitutions, really easy stuff. But it's never that. It's always some fouls in the game. And basketball is that hybrid of contact, non-contact, right? We understand that it is designed to be no contact, but there's supposed to be contact. There are things that go into it, such as, well, I got bumped a little bit on my drive, but then I beat the defender. Does it warrant a defensive call? Well, yeah, technically, because there was a foul, but not for flow of game. I could go for a while on this topic. So it's...
Look, I think the best thing that I've seen in junior basketball is giving the refs those green shirts. I think, when they're starting off, and I think, like we've alluded, coaches have to start somewhere. Players have to obviously start somewhere, and refs have to start somewhere. And I think sports is an imperfect game. That's the reality. It's the players are going to make X amount of mistakes every game unless they don't miss a single shot or grab every single rebound they jump at. It's not realistic. Coaches are going to obviously make decisions that don't always work. And I think referees, ultimately, you guys make your calls and you're claiming 60% of the time, perhaps at best, you're right. I think that's something that, you have to accept. And I think the irony probably is that if everything was perfect, like you sort of said, Well, I don't know. I don't even know how that would look. It's just not sports, right? That's the
Well,
point.
you'd have people fouled out. I'll be honest with you. You'd probably have people fouled out every single game because there is contact every game, especially your bigs, right? Like quite often I'd ref guys that were 6'5" or 6'6", and they'd battle with someone else, and they're two big guys, and they'd probably end up both fouling out. And it takes 2 fouls, especially in domestic with 5 fouls as your cap. It takes 2 fouls, and then all of a sudden, well, I'm adjusting how I'm playing defense, and you've changed how I want to play. And we're very conscious of all of this, and we want it to flow very nicely. But also, this is the other cold hard fact. When I was refereeing basketball as an A grade referee, it was $12.50 a game. Okay, so if you think that I'm on the take for making calls, where is the offer? Because getting paid $12.50 for essentially 40 to 50 minutes of worth of work, in which pretty much every game someone swears at you or yells at you or gives you a smart ass response, that's a bad trade. That's a bad trade. If you're going to get heckled for that much money, you must really like basketball. I'm not sure, but it's just not. And this is the thing, right? Like great character building for me, and definitely a lot of resilience that had to come into my development as a person. But by God, like it's just it's not the most important thing. There is going to be a bad call one day, and there is going to be things. And I've had people blame me for people being injured because I didn't call something 3 minutes ago, and it's just naturally going to escalate. The one thing I'd go back to is you control the controllable, right? And when you have 12 people on a court, if we're including the referees, there's so many different variables there. Players have hit me with the ball by accident because I'm part of the live court, and that's definitely not what they intended to do. And I wasn't intending to get hit by a ball, and I've been hit by a ball intentionally because I made a call and they didn't want me to get away with whatever it is that I did. I think, again, it comes down to that perspective. The reason why I quit refereeing was because I refereed a gentleman in a G2 game on a Wednesday night at about 9:30 at evening. And he slapped someone so hard on the wrist that both me and the other ref called the foul, and neither of us were really in doubt that that was a foul. And it was so obvious and was no issue. And he lost his marbles. And so we teched him because he just couldn't stop.
Yep.
And then we had to take him again because he was just out of control. And he decided to wait around. He decided to wait around for one more game for my shift to end, to follow me to my car, just to let me know that that was a really bad call that I made on a G2 game on a Wednesday night. And as I was escorted back with the assistance of, my basketball manager, I decided that $12.50 isn't worth this anymore, and I'm going to do something else.
Look, I think that's the point where you significantly cross the line with obviously supporting the game and supporting and obviously respecting and understanding the referees are part of the game. I think yeah, it's that understanding. Look, honestly, as a parent and a spectator, really, that's what you are as a parent. I actually have nothing to say to the refs. Because, what would be the point? I have nothing to say. I'm a spectator. I'm just another person that's sitting here watching this game. I have nothing to say. As a coach, I obviously at times have things to say. But if I'm looking to focus on the success of my game plan, I can't be committing too much energy to calls that I already know, like I said earlier, aren't going to be changed. Okay. And that's the same message that I often communicate to my players. Okay. Don't get me wrong. Of course, I will look for, understanding sometimes on calls that the referees make and things like that and whatnot, and clarification sometimes. Okay. And I'll sometimes voice my disagreement, of course. Okay. But that's literally like a 5-second take and let's move on. Okay. And that's the thing. And I think that's when obviously players carry on, and like this guy that obviously you just described as has waited another hour to come and share that with you. I think that's the point where we don't no one wants that in the game of basketball, and it's obviously that's what we do not do that. Do not do that if you're going to be a parent coming to a game. Honestly, you might as well just come and I don't know, maybe play footy. You can yell a bit more in footy because it's outdoors and no one can hear it anyway, right? That's the thing. So I guess which sort of leads into our next point that we had here, that we've obviously shared a fair bit about the experience, junior experience to think about when you're starting, what we're looking for. We talked a lot about support in all senses of that word for all the components here. And the point here that I put down to touch upon is that parents, I think, should seriously consider participating actively in basketball, potentially from a coaching perspective. Okay, so we talked about a team manager. Obviously, if you want to be a team manager, to really involve yourself that way. And I'm going to be clear here. This is not everyone's cup of tea. Okay, don't get me wrong. Okay, I'm not saying every parent should participate actively. If you're a parent that can't handle kids in general, then don't. if it's 40 minutes that you don't have to worry about your own kid that by bringing them to sports, then don't get involved with other people's kids. Okay. If you're obviously a parent that can't let the referee's calls go, then do sit on another court. Okay, those are some prerequisites there. Okay, but if you are a parent that likes to be involved with your child's activities, I think it's a great opportunity to say that there's always that opportunity to do so in basketball. And I'm going to say it's not even in a game. Okay, that's at home. That's saying, hey, want to grab the ball and go shoot some free throws in the driveway. That's going, hey, want to walk down to the park and let's go play some basketball. Hey, I saw you've been doing some passing drills at training this week in the under 10s group. Why don't we go do some passing in the backyard? Okay, there's many ways that you can coach or involve yourself in a positive way with your child's game. Okay, and I think that's a real important component there, because again, if you think about it, we've talked about how we develop a passion or help our kids develop a passion for the sport. If this is something that they are doing on a daily or consistent basis, that they're loving every component of basketball. They love the part they're playing on the PlayStation. They love the part where they get to spend time with you in the backyard, getting better at whatever skill set they're practicing. They love the part where they play with their friends at school. They love the part where they play, they go to training and they play those games on the weekend and stuff like that. That's where that love and the passion of the sport comes out. Okay, and I think that's an important point, that I think that, even if you're not skilled at basketball or you experience basketball, maybe you never played basketball when you were a junior either, and that's fine. Okay, you can come and pick up these skill sets by simply observing. Okay, you sit into any 60-minute coaching session, and if you just paid attention, you'd be able to go home and take away, I'd hopefully say, at least 3 or 4 drills. Okay, that's the point. Okay, so there's always these opportunities here. And at home, again, it's that progressiveness of player development. Okay, again, when we're talking about passing, for example, there's so many different sort of passes to work on. Okay, especially with juniors, I work a lot on players being able to pass with both hands. Can I throw this pass one-handed with my right hand and one-handed with my left hand? Okay, again, it's the same with like shooting, like those layups. If you hopefully have enough concrete out the front and a good, reasonable basketball ring, being able to work on both hands. Okay, because again, like we touched upon, I said obviously defense is so important in being a successful basketball player. The ability to be able to work both sides of the game is equally as important as an individual player to be to be considered a really good basketball player. And again, players don't always get that reinforcement. They want to see what works. So hey, I can make right-hand layups, so I'll just make right-hand layups for the rest of my life. Except when I'm on the left-hand side, all I can do is shoot a right-hand layup, right? That's the thing. All right, so it's that sort of reinforcement. I think that and I put here in the notes, as being a basketball coach, not only in an official capacity, but obviously as a parent, can be a real positive to what you're trying to hopefully build and develop and grow in your child.
So I think there's 2 extra things for the entryway for basketball. Number one is, the internet is actually our friend now. The amount of YouTube videos that you could probably find for basketball drills, even if you're a layperson or don't understand the sport, you could set your kid up for that. And obviously iPads, you can put it outside, pause it, kind of get the drill. And if you make that a daily habit, you eventually make it your drill, right? So that's one thing. But the second is, and you were touching on it with the right-hand layup, I'm just getting glued to it. It's balancing the I'm good at this and I'm getting better at that. And it's the feedback loop of keep my strengths strong, but keep my weaknesses growing or improving. And that's the hardest part, because when we watch highlights, right? So Steph Curry is a really easiest one. Since the prevalence of Steph Curry, everyone all of a sudden is like, I want to shoot step back threes or side step threes, right? When they never did the initial step of shooting set threes. And it's the same for dribble moves. You know what I mean? Like it's, oh, I want to do a slick crossover, but I actually can't dribble with my left hand very well. So when I do a crossover, I'm kind of just smacking it straight back to my right hand so I can get going. Or, I want to do a hezzy dribble, but I actually don't know how to shuffle my feet. So I kind of just end up carrying the ball. And, for people who aren't well adept or aren't training, they do this stuff in game. And I've refed a couple of games where you get hilarious attempted moves, and some people are good at it and they just laugh it off, and other people are seriously like, what did I do wrong? And that's where, getting the fundamentals right and almost using the fundamentals as your basis of strength. I still shoot around from time to time, and one of the things that I do now for my warm-up is, you do a couple of set shots before you worry about doing dribbles to get into your set shots. And then if you're going to start doing some fadeaways or some spins or some two-step stuff, you still start with the things that you're good at. You feel good putting the ball in the hoop, feel good handling the ball and getting that initial stuff before you go straight into the drills. And I think for people at home, you have YouTube videos that start with, this is how to start dribbling a basketball, to this is how you can do a figure eight, to this is how you can, do the sham god. So it's progressing yourself appropriately, not just going instantly to that. I think, as a quick anecdote, I remember when I tried to learn guitar as a kid, when you want to learn guitar, it's boring because you're supposed to learn how to pluck each string and learn basic chords.
Yep.
But in my head as a kid, but I want to play a Metallica song. I want to go, that's how, like, I'll just get good because I'll just do it. And sport is exactly the same. You can't just play it an osmosis skill. It's not going to happen, right? So training, practice, that's where a lot of the development occurs.
Look, absolutely. You talked about Steph Curry. You said, talking about step back threes and fadeaways and, pulling up in transition 35 feet out. I think there's a fundamental, even before him shooting threes, I would imagine that Steph Curry can shoot a two. Yeah,
correct. Yeah,
that's the point. Yeah, and before he shot that 20-foot two and that 15-foot two, I imagine he could make a layup. Yeah, and that's the point here. Okay, and a big part of it is that we probably haven't said this word tonight, is repetition. Okay, it's all about repetition. Okay, you go away, you have that sort of, leave the game and you go, what can we work on? What's the feedback? You talked about feedback earlier tonight as a coach. And often, to simplify it without specifically having to give each player a tailored feedback answer, is that continue to put the reps in on what we've been doing and whatever that might be. So whether that week we've been doing layups, then go shoot more. Whether that week we've been doing passing or defense or whatever it is that we've been focusing on, dribbling, okay, go put in more reps. Okay, you can never put in more reps than needed, in a sense, depending how good you want to be and whatever level you might get yourself to. Which sort of ties into really our last area here. We want to talk about a bit about pathways. I guess we talked about, obviously, I think junior domestic, which is, like I said, an important part of taking your next step from, I want to play basketball, okay, and I like basketball. What can I do here? And you will get a mixed bag in junior domestic. That's the reality, because that's where everyone has to start. That's where coaches have to start. Okay, that's where referees ultimately start, right? You get all your green shirts at junior domestic. Okay, it's probably at the under 8s and under 10s level. That's the point. Okay, everyone has to start there. Okay, and from there, you can obviously then go into your VJBL rep, obviously Friday night competition, starting at under 12. So, you'll be at the youngest, generally about 9 or 10 years old, in that sort of sense. And from there, obviously then progressing, looking at other options outside of that once a week game and twice a week training generally, is like things like basketball, schools, like, or schools with basketball programs, which there are a few around in Melbourne and all around Australia nowadays. And then you've obviously got your sort of your elite sort of training squads and sessions there too, which generally you pay, obviously, a weekly or monthly or term sort of fee, which then those coaches are often ex-players, ex-professional players from some capacity, which will then continue to coach and teach your kids skill sets and stuff to obviously assist them in their game there. And it's all part and parcel of the whole process, I think, here. Because, well, firstly, let's just go back to the point here. It's all part and parcel of the process from a repetition perspective. Okay, it's all about the same things, but adding layers to it. Okay, as a coach here, it's like, cool, you can make a layup. Can you make a reverse layup? Yeah. Can you now make a reverse layup with your weak hand coming on the other side? And so on and so forth, because there's so many components, and I'm only talking about one area of the game, and ultimately it's just scoring and shooting, okay? All right, that it's all about being able to have enough repetitions to be able to go out there and do, well, a perfect basketball player will be one that can do anything on the floor. Okay, that's the key here. And I guess, all of these options through the rep program, obviously through a basketball sort of school program, and obviously through any sort of elite sort of training programs as well, is simply challenging your player, okay, and your child to obviously be able to add more things to their game. And I think they're all beneficial depending on obviously your level of investment and commitment and resources you have to obviously support your child in their passion here.
Yeah, I think obviously everything that you mentioned, the pathways, it doesn't necessarily start with junior basketball, but you have to put it in perspective that if you begin later in life, the chances of your pathway going much beyond just social are pretty low. And then, yeah, obviously with the under 8s, under 10s, they're also grading. I think we've made a couple of references to it, but really didn't tackle into it. Grading exists for a reason. So, starting at the bottom grade, a lot of people connotate that as, oh, I'm really, really bad. I've played bottom grade, I've played top grade, and everything in between. You play it for different reasons. Some people are really good and play bottom grade because they just want to have a more social, relaxed experience. Some people play A grade, but they're not A grade players, but they're on a team that is carried enough by that. So, you want to find a team that is developing you appropriately, and your competition is hopefully designed to be accommodating to that. Now, for boys basketball, it's really easy. You typically can get a pretty good parity in the league, and it's okay. Female basketball gets a bit more tricky because the numbers are always lower, and sometimes you do have that team that just demolishes everyone. And technically speaking, as a parent of a child on a team like that, that's not necessarily good, right? And that's where our result fixation can sometimes bite us in the butt, because you might blitz the competition, but there's a lot of reasons why you're blitzing the competition that may or may not be directly correlated with your skill. And constant winning is never good. Like I had a season where we won every game until the grand final, in which, therefore the season would be deemed unsuccessful. We had so much success during it that it was just, coded in everything. And it's the same for losing. I've been on teams where you win 1 or 2 games in a season, but there's games within the game, right? So, all right, if you're going to lose every game this season, well, what are we working on, right? Do we want to cut our point differential down? Do we want to, develop specific skills? Do we want to get everyone an even spread? There's things that you can do constantly across that. That is just the entry level thing, right? So obviously when you go to rep basketball, there's tryouts that are involved with that as well. And, typically coaches are pretty good at giving people good information about that. Don't be a pushy parent if a coach is legitimately steering you away from that right now. If they're telling you, don't do it, right? Don't do it, because I think we both are well aware, there are clubs, the rep clubs that will happily have your child on a rep basketball team, knowing full well that child's not going to touch the court more than a couple of minutes per game, and will still collect the $300, $400 and the uniform cost of $200, and have you driving all around the city or all around the state doing things when your child is a part of it but isn't really playing. Now, yes, the training may be high quality, but is that the best use of your time and money? And then there's also the mental aspect of, well, if you think it's bad in under 8s when your child's only getting 18 minutes, how's your 13 or 14-year-old going to feel when they are just high-fiving and cheering everybody? and has driven an hour and a half to do it. So
Yeah, look, I think, yeah, it's all about that fundamentals of not only skills, but expectations and the fundamentals of the correct support, which we touched upon tonight. That if you, like you just alluded to, if you think that it's all going to be divvied up and fair every game, you know, you're going to be awfully disappointed once you take it to the next level. And if you're not deserving of the minutes that you're obviously given, then you're going to be awfully disappointed and shocked why it's not just a fair world out there, why it's just all given to you in that sense. So I think that's a, you know, and I think the other point here is that by the time you get to, I think the rep, there's a few points here. Okay, we touched upon the three areas here where there's pathways from I love basketball, I'm a kid, I love basketball, my parents are supportive. Okay, where can I go? And they all sort of tie together. There's no real set that one pathway. Okay, because the elite training, for example, which can be quite expensive at times, and you know you'll get different trainers that work in different intensity and different ways and different methods and so on and so forth. So again, finding the right one that your player sort of enjoys and sort of the game sort of develops in the way that you're looking for, what you're hoping to achieve in that sort of sense is important. But that's a core component that often parents don't always take because maybe it's expensive. And don't get me wrong, I get it. Okay, it's expensive. I send my kid there for a while too, and it can be expensive. You get up at 6 a.m. in the morning, potentially 5, 6 a.m. in the morning. You go do that before school for 90 minutes or something like that. Okay, but you'll get a lot out of that because the commitment to succeed, firstly, is there. Okay, because you know again, it's that ingraining that expectation of what you'll need to do to be successful and to be able to maximize your game. And maximize your game doesn't mean you're going to be LeBron. Maximize your game means you're going to be the best version of you. Okay, and I think that's the key. So these elite trainings obviously set that expectation for the player that, you know, I will have to sacrifice getting up in the morning. I might not like it, but I'll do it because I want to get better. Then obviously, if you were to consider like a basketball school and program and things like that, again, it puts you in the right sort of environment to continue to give you a repetition. Okay, your repetitions and the surrounding, I don't know what you want to call it, the right group of friendships, you know, that obviously are like-minded. You'll be with other kids that have the same passion, that also probably get up at 5, 6 a.m. in the morning to work on the game, that go home and shoot hoops till it gets dark and then play 2K at night. Okay, it's that sort of the same sort of group, because hey, if they're not in that sort of group, then they play hang out with the group that goes, hey, let's go to this party. Okay, they play hang out with that group that says, let's go do other things that you probably not basketball related. That's the thing. Okay, and then it all then boils down to that VJBL experience where, again, from Australia, okay, is really your only really sort of pathway to go from VJBL to maybe once you're older, youth league or senior men's competitive sort of, you know, professional or semi-professional basketball. And obviously the NBL 1 and NBL now that, you know, it's obviously starting to grow back again, or obviously travel overseas and play, you know, professionally one day, you know, when you're older in that sense, whatever that might be, not just the NBA, you know, it could be Europe or China or, you know, those sort of countries in that sense, that the VJBL, your goal there is to bring it all together there, okay? Because again, the reality here is that, I'll say this right now, the VJBL is a mixed bag, okay? You know, it's a mixed bag because, again, coaches will do a handful of seasons from a domestic perspective and jump over there, and you might get a kid that's 20, or you might get a guy that's 40. All right, you might get a guy that's, you know, 55 and, you know, sort of still preaching the 1990s way of basketball, okay, versus obviously, say, maybe an ex-player that obviously, you know, has, you know, really been there and done that and had, you know, a first-hand career from a basketball perspective. And the point here, it's a mixed bag. So you have to take all these components together to then maximize it into the VJBL and the Friday night games, okay, which then allows you to showcase what you can do, okay? Because I think the last sort of points I guess I want to touch upon in this whole podcast here is that it's like anything. It's a whether you're next LeBron or whether you're even going to be a professional player, it's being able to show people what you can do. Okay, so and that would go for any sort of sport. Okay, and I think the beauty here is that it's not necessarily only because I score the most points. Okay, and unfortunately, it's not always simply just because I'm the tallest kid on the floor. Is that am I a player that my motor runs hot the whole 40 minutes? Okay, whether on the bench or off the bench, whether I'm missing all my shots or I'm not, whether I'm still playing as hard as I can play, and whether I'm able to do whatever is being asked of me on the floor. So whether that's going left or right, whether that's a left-hand layup or right-hand layup, or whether I'm open at the three-point line, I can shoot that three. Okay, whether I miss it or make it, hopefully I make it more often than not, but I still shoot it. That's the point. I still shoot it. Okay, and I think that's sort of what ultimately your culmination of years, let's be clear, we've now gone from where you're starting off as a under 8s to where you're hoping to get to now, potentially at the under 16s or under 18 sort of level. Okay, that's what you're hoping to be able to develop, and it's all fundamentals, because if you miss some of these steps, and I'll admit that, obviously, as a parent and as a coach, you do sometimes miss some of these steps. Okay, that it's hard to sometimes be consistent yourself. Okay, in that sort of sense. But if everyone plays their part, then it really does create the right sort of environment for the player to become the best player that they can be.
Yeah, it's good closing, I think, is that you do need a high level of intrinsic motivation, which is kind of, we're giving all this great advice, but ultimately, if the child doesn't want to do it, that's it. It's over. It doesn't matter how good the advice is. And even if the child wants to do it and then suddenly changes their mind, well, then it's over. And it's probably the biggest challenge or the biggest frustration that we have, because we got to a certain level, and maybe in revisionist, I mean, I look at myself and I think I wish I did more when I could, or when I was younger, because there's things that now are gaps. So for example, my left hand dribble, I can now dribble my left hand quite confidently, but I got away for not doing it for almost 6-7 years. Turnaround fades became more popular after my first knee injury because, I needed something else to get me going, but that would have been helpful when I had 2 good knees, like just extra things in your game. And, as the coaches, coaches constantly sound like they're never content and they're never happy and there's always something else to improve on. But the reality is that there always is something new to improve on. And you hear the greats talk about it and they say, I'm back in the gym and I'm trying to work on this and I'm trying to work on that. And it's not, you got to balance it. You can't become self-deprecating. You can't think, oh, it's just an uphill battle and never gets better. But yeah, in a weird sense, it is actually constant. It's a treadmill, and whenever you choose to officially get off it, either because you have to or because you want to, while you're on that treadmill, you're constantly trying to do something new, or you're constantly trying to get better, or you're constantly trying to improve. And you try your best to surround yourself with people who want to help you with that. You try your best to support the people who are also on their own treadmills. I think that was one thing I missed a little bit before, is that build others up as well. That's a culture thing. If you're on a team with someone, giving them a high five, cheering them on, encouraging them to take the shot, that's huge, because if that happens, if that becomes a habit, then you get it in return, or at least you should get it in return. And that's just as important, because one thing, we could do a separate pod on this, but one of the worst things that's happening, and we're probably guilty of it because we've done so many pods about it as topics, but basketball can become really me, really like, oh, they've got to do this, they've got to do that. And you can almost lose sight of the fact that, like, all 5 people on the court have a role to play, and if everyone was doing their role, we will be having a different level of success. And, if we bring it back to the NBA, the Golden State Warriors did officially win the championship. And, Draymond Green was getting roped over the coals for a while that, he wasn't scoring. Like, he's just not a threat from scoring, but he was playing a role and he was quite important. Wiggins not a top scorer, almost half of what Steph Curry is getting, but there's a defensive element that people want to give him credit for. And Klay Thompson not having the same level of scoring that he wants, but there's a potency from three that he's doing that just makes him a certain thing. And, all of these things work in tandem. And so, whoever's listening to this, the four of you, I don't know who it is, but yeah,
10,
whatever parent puts their kid through this, it's, there might be a day where your kid scores 40 points. There might be a day where your kid gets to hold up a trophy. There might be a day that your kid meets the new best friend. It's, you want to put them in opportunities for things to happen. And that's the big one.